She looked at him with tears streaming down her eyes and said, "I have blood cancer, and the doctor said this is my last week on earth. By next week, I won't be alive anymore. I would be dead. All I want is just to stay alive. I don't want to die." She wept bitterly. Her teacher's mood changed. Tear dropped from his eye. He lacked words to use. He didn't know how to console the innocent, beautiful, strong, intelligent, and most admired student. He lacked words of hope, especially now that he has fallen deeply in love with her. Life is really unfair to her.
Ugochukwu, a fresh Nigerian National Youth Service Corps NYSC member, had been posted to a small village secondary school in Rivers State, and he was excited yet apprehensive, as it was his first time teaching in such a remote place. The school was small, the kids humble, but there was one student who stood out to him in ways he never expected. Her name was Sandra, a 17-year-old girl with a sharp mind and an unwavering spirit. She sat in the back row of his class, always answering questions with grace and intelligence. But what struck Ugochukwu the most was the quiet sadness in her eyes, a sadness that never seemed to fade. It was during a typical class session, as Ugochukwu asked his students to share their dreams and future ambitions, that Sandra's words pierced through the room like a sharp knife. The question was simple: what do you want to be when you grow up? The other students responded with dreams of doctors, lawyers, and teachers, but when it came to Sandra's turn, she lowered her gaze, her voice almost a whisper. "I just want to stay alive," she said so quietly that it almost went unnoticed. Her classmates laughed, thinking it was a joke, but the laughter faded when she continued, her eyes now brimming with unshed tears. "I have blood cancer," she said. "I've been living with it for years. My blood is changed every 4 days. My parents, they've spent everything they have to try and save me. But the doctor said I only have 1 week left." The class went silent. Ugochukwu's heart dropped as he looked at her, the weight of her words settling heavily in the room. He wanted to say something, anything, to ease her pain, but no words came. He left the classroom heartbroken without completing his lesson. The days that followed were filled with a quiet tension. Ugochukwu watched as Sandra grew weaker, her energy fading with every passing day. He had already grown attached to her, not just because of her intelligence, but because of her strength and the way she carried herself, despite her suffering. He couldn't figure out how a person could endure so much pain with such grace. One day, Sandra didn't come to school. Her absence was noticed by everyone. The following morning, word spread to the village like wildfire. Sandra had passed away in her sleep. Ugochukwu's heart shattered. He couldn't comprehend how such a beautiful soul could be taken so young, so unfairly. But he didn't know what to do, how to grieve, or how to express the sorrow that enveloped him. He went to her home, hoping to see her one last time, but all that remained was the cold, distant silence of grief. Her parents were devastated, and Ugochukwu could see their pain reflected in the empty space where their daughter once sat. Later that day, Sandra's body was taken to the village morgue, the finality of her death sinking in for everyone who knew her. But for Ugochukwu, it was too much to bear. He had been so captivated by her strength, so moved by her desire to live, that he couldn't just let her go. He sneaked into the morgue that night. He couldn't explain why he felt compelled to do so, only that he needed to see her one last time. He sat by her side in the quiet, dim-lit room, silently grieving. His heart was broken. He wished he could have done something. He wished he could have saved her. As he looked at her, the reality of her death began to hit him hard. She had never truly known how much he admired her, how much he had silently fallen for her, even though it wasn't right. He had never told her. Now it was too late. Ugochukwu sat there for hours, staring at her peaceful face, wishing he could turn back time. But there was no going back. Sandra was gone, and he would never forget her. The following weeks were a blur for Ugochukwu. He tried to teach, tried to move on, but nothing felt right. Every lesson, every word felt empty without her presence in the classroom. He had been the one to ask the question that led to her revealing the truth about her illness, and now he regretted it deeply. Her parents, heartbroken yet resilient, chose to honor her memory in a small village ceremony. Ugochukwu attended, unable to hold back his tears as they laid her to rest. He couldn't help but think of all the things she could have been. She was so full of potential, so full of life, and yet her time had been cut short by a cruel illness. The finality of death, the helplessness of losing someone you never fully got to love in the way you wanted, haunted him every day. He wondered if she ever knew how much he cared, how much he wanted to be by her side through it all. He would carry her memory with him for the rest of his life, hoping to honor her legacy by being a better teacher, a better person. And as he stood there, watching the rain fall softly over her grave, Ugochukwu realized that the only thing he could truly give her now was a promise to never forget her and to live the life she never had the chance to live. Her memory would live on in his heart forever. He cried loudly with pain. He opened his eyes wide. His body was soaked with sweat on his bed and his head banged. He looked around to understand where he was. He realized he was in his room, and all that had happened was just a dream. He was relieved. He knelt down to thank God because what he saw didn't happen in reality. And Sandra was not dead. He was very excited. He hurriedly prepared for school and left because it was time for him to teach. He was happy because he would see Sandra, his secret crush. This time, irrespective of her illness or she being a student and underage, he was going to tell her how he feels about her. Ugochukwu got to class to teach, but didn't see Oluchi. Her classmates were not happy. He asked about her. They told him she died that very morning on her way to school. He was heartbroken. Ugochukwu was highly disappointed. He was very excited that morning, knowing that all what he saw was just a dream. And now coming to the class, he has gotten a shock of his life. What he saw in his dream has finally come to pass. He couldn't imagine her lying lifeless. Ugochukwu was very pained, as though it was his own life that was cut short. He didn't know what to do. He even blamed NYSC for posting him to that very village just to fall in love with a cancerous student. A student who had bathed with leukemia for ages. She doesn't deserve to die now. She's too innocent to die. Why is life so unfair to her? Sandra is too intelligent to die young. I wish I could bring her back to life. Ugochukwu muttered to himself. He cried. His students also joined, and they all cried. He was heartbroken. He rushed to her house, but her sad parents told him his remains have been taken to the morgue. He sneakily and secretly entered the morgue, located her body, held her hands, and silently cried in agony. He loved her so much and can't imagine her being dead. He pecked her, and soon he started making love to her. In less than 2 minutes, she shook her hand, opened her eyes, and screamed. Ugochukwu gasped in shock and shouted, seeing that the dead girl moved her body. He jumped out of her, thinking her ghost wanted to harm him. He hit his head on the wall and fell to the floor. The morticians heard the sounds and hurried to the room. They were surprised to see a corps member lying who has fainted. They wondered how he got there and what he had come to do. They found Sandra staring at them. The dead girl had woken up. They were surprised but hurriedly rushed her to the hospital. Her parents were excited about her return. Ugochukwu was arrested. Sandra was given a first-class medical attention at the city hospital. A thorough test was conducted on her, and it was discovered that the blood cancer she had disappeared and can't be traced. It was like a miracle. She was excited likewise, her parents and loved ones. A few days later, she remembered what she saw while she was dead. She saw herself in the cloud and a big book was opened. Her name was searched for, but couldn't be found. The person who searched for her name asked her to go back because it wasn't her. Her time to die yet. He told her, "My daughter, learn to forgive and never take anything to heart. Do not let the one who sincerely loved you, even in death, to suffer." She told her parents what she had earlier seen. The father, being a wise native man, thought about what his daughter had shared with them. He ordered for immediate release of Ugochukwu, the core member who had raped his dead daughter. A few years later, she graduated from the university and got married to Ugochukwu, and they lived happily after